Her daughter kicked her out when she found out she lost her job, but he had no idea. She had a secret plan. Her daughter kicked her out when she found out she'd lost her job, but she had no idea her mother had a secret plan all along. Carol didn't say a word as the front door shut behind her. The echo of it felt heavier than wood, like a final goodbye wrapped in silence. She clutched the strap of her worn canvas bag, her fingers stiff, not from the cold, but from the kind of ache that sets in when your own child looks at you like a burden. Her daughter Madison stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. Her fiancé Jake hovered just behind, pretending to scroll through his phone but clearly listening, like he was waiting for a moment to step in and resolve things. Carol had raised Madison alone. No help, no breaks, no complaints. She worked double shifts at the bakery, missed her own birthday more times than she could count, just so Madison could have a decent life. "You could have told me," Madison had snapped, her voice brittle like glass. "You've been here for weeks doing nothing, no income, just existing," Carol had whispered. "I didn't want to worry you." But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. Jake finally chimed in, not looking up. "We're planning a wedding, Mads. We can't afford to carry your mom, too. She needs to figure things out." There was no goodbye, no hug, no thank you for the decades of love and sacrifice, just the quiet roll of suitcase wheels over a driveway she once shoveled clean after snowstorms. Carol didn't cry. Not when the door closed. Not when she reached the corner bus stop, by the old church where Madison had her first piano recital. She just sat, spine tight, breath steady, like a soldier waiting for orders. What Madison didn't know was that Carol hadn't been fired. She had left. Her back had been screaming for months, and the doctor's warning had finally stuck. Even her manager begged her to stay, but Carol had other reasons. She was done surviving. It was time to build something that lasted, because what her daughter didn't know was that while she was busy planning her big wedding, Carol had been planning something too, quietly, carefully, with every ounce of strength she had left. And soon, they'd all know. Her daughter kicked her out the day she learned she had lost her job, but she had no idea her mother had a secret plan buried deeper than pride, pain, or poverty. Carol didn't fight back. She didn't scream. She just stood there, shoulders drawn in, as her daughter Madison walked away, without a hug, without a second glance, without remembering who used to hold her when no one else showed up. The front door didn't slam. It clicked like a lock twisting inside Carol's chest. She reached for the handle of her old suitcase, the one with the tear at the corner and faded airline tags from trips she never took. Her hands trembled, not from age, not from weakness, but from the sting of betrayal so quiet it almost didn't feel real. The kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from your own blood. "Why didn't you tell me you weren't working?" Madison had said, her voice sharp with judgment, not concern. "You're just sitting around. Jake and I can't support you." Jake didn't say much, just stood there with his arms folded like it wasn't his problem, like Carol hadn't helped raise him too when his own mom walked out. Carol swallowed her pride instead of words. "I didn't want to burden you," she'd said. But Madison had already made up her mind. They had bills. They had goals. They didn't have room for a woman who once worked 3 jobs, so her daughter could go to art camp. So she left. No one helped her carry the suitcase. No one asked where she'd go. Just the wind brushing past as she stepped onto the cracked sidewalk of a life she thought she'd earned a place in. And yet, Carol didn't cry. Because what they didn't know was that this wasn't the end of her story. It was the start of her plan. Carol had always been the quiet kind of strong, the kind that never asked for help, never complained, never let the world see the cracks forming behind her smile. She raised Madison alone after her husband died in a factory collapse that made the news for a week but ruined her life forever. Carol had been 29, with a toddler, an empty bank account, and no time to grieve. She worked morning shifts at a diner where her fingers froze in winter grease. then cleaned offices at night until her knees gave out from the bleach. She skipped meals, wore the same coat for 9 winters, and told Madison the lights flickered because of the weather, not because she couldn't pay the bill. And when Madison cried over broken shoes, Carol made up bedtime stories about magical moms who turned worn souls into wings. No one saw the nights she stayed awake balancing grocery lists and overdue notices. No one thanked her when she sold her wedding ring to fix Madison's braces. She didn't ask for thanks. She just kept going, kept giving, even when there was nothing left but willpower and worn-out shoes. So when Carol lost her part-time job at the community bookstore, the only job she'd been able to hold since her hands started trembling, she didn't panic. She didn't tell Madison because she knew her daughter was busy, planning a wedding, building a life. Carol had survived worse than job loss. She just needed a little time. But time wasn't something Madison was willing to give. And after everything, Carol found herself standing on a cold porch, suitcase in hand, cut off by the very person she once gave everything for. The front door clicked softly behind Carol, its faded paint chipped from years of storms, the latch's final snap echoing in the quiet hallway like a closing chapter. She paused a moment, fingertips brushing the cool, worn brass handle, the faint scent of lavender soap lingering in the air, a memory of better days. Outside, the cracked concrete driveway stretched beneath a pale morning sun, casting long shadows from the bare branches overhead. Her suitcase wheels scraped unevenly across the fractured surface, each bump a reminder of every hard mile she'd walked before. 3 blocks down, Carol settled onto a battered wooden bench, the peeling green paint flaking onto her hands as she sat. The street hummed quietly with passing cars and distant children's laughter, but all she could hear was the steady pulse of her own breath and the soft rustle of autumn leaves skittering in the breeze. The sunlight filtered through the cracked blinds of the church across the street, casting slivers of light that danced over the cracked floorboards inside, where once, a little girl, had practiced piano notes under the watchful eyes of her mother, a silent promise that life could still change. Carol didn't shout. She didn't plead. She simply lifted her chin and nodded once, a quiet acceptance settling deep into her bones. There was no bitterness in her eyes, only a steady calm, like a river that has learned to flow around every obstacle. Without a backward glance, she picked up her suitcase, the worn leather handle soft beneath her fingers, and stepped lightly onto the cracked sidewalk. Her footsteps were measured, slow, deliberate, each one carrying the weight of years, but also the strength to move forward. She didn't cry. Not here, not now. There was no need for tears to announce her pain, no need for anger to fill the spaces left behind. Her silence spoke louder than any argument ever could, and as the door clicked shut behind her, Carol disappeared down the street with quiet dignity, leaving behind only the soft echo of a life once lived and the promise of a plan only she knew. What Madison didn't know was that Carol's silence had never been empty. Behind the quiet walls of that small, worn house, Carol had been weaving a secret lifeline. Years ago, when money was tight but hope was fierce, she had quietly set aside every spare dollar into a modest investment account. Small, careful deposits no one noticed, no one questioned. While Madison was planning her future, Carol was building hers, not with flash or fanfare, but with patience, faith, and the kind of moral strength that only comes from knowing hard work isn't always seen. There were stocks bought in the shadows of paychecks, bonds held quietly through storms of doubt, and a trust fund opened under her maiden name, a secret safety net woven to protect herself, and someday to remind her family that dignity and perseverance can never be taken away. And now, as she sat, watching the sun rise over that cracked bench, Carol knew this was only the beginning. A quiet rebellion born from years of sacrifice, ready to bloom in a way no one ever expected. Madison thought she'd won that day, cutting ties, drawing lines, believing she'd pushed her mother away for good. But life has a way of humbling even the proudest hearts. As months passed, the wedding, plans slowed, bills piled higher, and Jake's steady confidence began to crack. Madison's sharp words, once weapons, turned back on her like shadows in the evening light. No longer did she stand tall behind judgment. Instead, she faced the quiet truth that sometimes love means admitting when you're wrong. One chilly afternoon, with the weight of regret in her eyes, Madison found herself standing at a door she thought she'd closed forever. Not with demands or anger, but with a soft voice and a humbled heart, she asked for a chance. Not for forgiveness, but to rebuild what had been broken. And Carol, who had carried the burden without complaint, opened that door with quiet grace, knowing that true strength isn't in holding grudges, but in letting go, and allowing love to find its way home again. Carol sat on the back porch of her modest new home, watching the wind ripple across the tall grass, a steaming cup of chamomile cradled in her hands. The sun dipped low, brushing gold across the horizon, while a single leaf fluttered down and landed softly at her feet. Madison sat beside her, quiet, not speaking, just listening to the breeze and the breath between them. There was no need for apologies anymore. Life had already spoken in ways louder than words ever could. Carol turned to her daughter and said gently, "You don't measure love by how loud it speaks, but by how long it stays when no one's looking." And in that moment, the pain of the past settled like dust on a windowsill. Still there, but no longer heavy, because forgiveness had taken root, and in its silence, peace had finally found its voice. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?